let's paint a pink lotus flower using a combination of watercolor techniques. Hello and welcome back to Run My Arts Watercolor series. So today I'll be showing you how to paint a lotus flower using very simple techniques in watercolor, and I assure you even a beginner could nail it. As usual, I'll be demonstrating this painting on Canson XL cold press watercolor paper, 300 grams per square meter, and the size is A5. For the first layer of painting, I'll be using the Da Vinci Casaneo mop style brush, which has a narrow tip, size 2. You can use a regular round brush which ranges from size 6 to 8. Now I'm going to start painting without a pre-sketch, meaning it's a blank watercolor paper, and I'm going to kickstart using the wet on dry technique. So for those who find it difficult to visualize the lotus flower as you paint, I would suggest you to draw a semicircle and then draw an outline of the lotus flower inside the semicircle. I hope it helps, though I don't prefer to make the pencil sketches in this tutorial. It's just a simple guideline. And the first color that I'm using is magenta from Schminke Horadam, and I'm mixing it in a very light consistency, meaning very watery. You can see here as I strain my brush bristle on the corner of the plate, it just flows. So that's what I mean by a very watery consistency, because I want the first layer to have a very light wash of the paint. Therefore, once the painting is dry, it will result in a very light image of the lotus flower, which will help me to keep layering them in the next few stages of the painting. So the first brush strokes are going to be focused on the center part of the flower where the most number of petals are being held, and I'm shaping it in a form of tulip like petals. So this is going to be the head or the center part of the entire lotus flower, and moving forward I am going to extend some of the outer part of the bloom of the lotus to indicate the opened petals. So I'm done painting the center part of the lotus flower. I'm sure it resembles the basic shape of a tulip flower, even though my image is not so bright over here. Hope you can visualize what I mean. So right now I am focused on painting the petals that are loosely open around the center part of the lotus flower. It's just going to be a few, so I'm not focused too much on the details right now. So just a few outer petals would do the trick to create an impression of an opened or bloomed lotus flower. So while the lotus flower painting is still semi-wet, I am just dropping in a little bit of lemon yellow or citron, which has a very mild light yellow tone. Moving on, I thought of adding a simple looking lotus bud in the background. So it's just a simple painting of the unopened flower, and of course I'm painting this using the wet on dry technique as well, and a little hint of that lemon yellow onto the bud painting as well. So I thought of painting an impression of a simple lotus leaf, and the color that I'm using is olive green yellowish. You can use any green of your choice, and once again I'm painting this using the wet on dry technique, using the mop style brush. So lotus leaves are usually large and soft in nature, so you can paint them with an uneven edge, trying to mimic that soft look of the leaf. And the paint mix consistency is also light, not as light as the lotus flowers paint mix, but medium, I would say. From the color itself you can judge that it is a bit watery, And once I have painted the basic shape of the lotus leaf, I am going to make another thicker mix of the same paint shade so that I can drop in some darker consistency towards some part of the wet leaf areas, so that it creates some texture or perspective of depth on the leaf surface. So a little bit of cleanup onto the lotus petal where it has been stained with the green shade, as well as lifting out some pigment towards the middle part of the leaf to create some highlights. So for the next layer of painting, I'll be using the micro brush most of the time, and in order to proceed with this step, please ensure that the entire painting is dry, especially the lotus flower, because I'm going to start to layer the petals. So in this step, we are going to focus on creating each and individual petals starting from the center of the flower. So as you can see here, I have already applied the permanent carmine paint. It's not a very watery consistency, slightly thick, so you will notice that the color is quite dark in shade. And after applying or shaping it in a form of petal, I'm just giving it some light washes using a clean damp brush. So by giving it light washes, this will somehow shape the individual petals, and I'm going to repeat the same process for each and every petal on the lotus flower. So notice, as I apply the paint, I am not painting it in a full form of petal, simply because these are the petals at the back of the lotus flower, and there's going to be overlapping petals on the foreground. So which is why I am not painting it in an entire full shape of the petals. So now I am going to paint the overlapping petals that I mentioned just now, and which is also facing on the front. But take note, I am also not painting this in a full form at the moment, because there are going to be more petals in layers. So next I am going to paint the petals on the right hand side of the flower, and I am referring to a reference photo at this point of time so that I don't misjudge the placing of the petals on the flower as I paint. So you can have a reference photo handy as you go about this painting. So this particular petal has a unique shape simply because it is at the right hand side of the flower head, and from this angle it will definitely look like a folded, or it has a folded form of the petal. So which is why I have painted in a curvy line so that we can distinguish between the inner part of the petal and the outer part of the petal. So the same concept applies to this particular petal, which is hanging low, whereby it has a folded shape. So in order to create that impression of the folded petal, we will have to make that outline in between the entire petal, so that you distinguish between the bottom part and the inner part or upper part of the petal. And as usual, I'm giving it some light washes after applying that dark paint mix. So keep repeating the painting techniques as you go along painting the entire flower, and as I said, a reference photo will be helpful. And basically this is not a very complicated painting technique. It's just applying a little bit of paint and then giving them some light washes using the clean damp brush. So it's quite repetitive and easy to follow. The only thing that is crucial with this type of painting is that you need to pay more attention to the shapes, especially if it has a lot of overlapping shapes, as in this lotus flower. The same technique shall apply to other flowers that has got many petals, as in roses, peony, and so on. So right now I am going to fine tune the center part of the flower where there's a large main petal. So I'm going to paint that outline using the same technique. Alright, so to create some depth into this entire lotus flower, we will have to differentiate between the darker values and lighter values. So I thought painting a light shade of gray would be the best way to indicate all those darker parts on the flower petals. So I'm using a mix of burnt sienna and sapphire blue, or you can use ultramarine, and arrive at this cool gray mix. And you want a very watery consistency because you just want a little hint of that gray mix onto the petals. So I am using the micro brush to apply this gray mix because I just want them to stain a little bit on those petals for that shadow effects, and then giving it some light washes using a round brush. So done with the shadow effects, I am going to fine tune the entire flower by giving it some brighter shade, especially focus on the tips of the individual petals. So the paint color that I'm going to use is Opera Rose Pink, which is a very bright looking pink, very close to a neon pink. And in order to proceed with this step, I will have to pre-wet the petals part by part. I'm not pre-wetting the entire flower because I'm afraid I would lose control over the profuse bleeding of the pigment onto the pre-wet surface. So it will be safer to do it part by part, just like what I'm doing here, kick-starting from the top of the flower head. So basically, after pre-wetting the individual petals, you will just have to outline or touch the corners of the pre-wet petals using the micro brush. So you would see the wet paint bleeding onto the pre-wet areas with minimal effect, simply because we are using a micro brush. If you use a larger brush, then there would be too much of pigment and bleeding going through, because we want to keep the petal colors very minimal with just vibrancy on the corners of the petals and the tips. By the way, if you do notice the uncontrolled bleeding of the pigment into areas where it shouldn't be staining, then just use the clean damp brush to lift out those stained area. You can also use a clean paper towel to lift the unwanted staining. Alright, done with the flowers. Now it's time to fine tune the leaf painting. So I've mixed a hint of sapphire or burnt umber into the previous green mix, which is olive green yellowish, because I want a darker shade compared to the earlier first layer. And before dropping in this paint, I have pre-wet the leaf surface. You can do this part by part if you're afraid to pre-wet the entire leaf surface, so no issues about it. Alright, some final touch-ups or fine-tuning of the lotus flower is needed, whereby I am going to paint some veins on the flower petals, and I am using magenta, this color that I used in this video, and I'm using my script brush to paint in those fine looking veins. And in order to achieve a very fine crisp looking veins, then please ensure that the entire lotus painting is dry. So I would like to soften the look of these flower veins, fine lines that I've painted earlier, so that it appears more natural. So in order to do this, I am going to wipe off some of these lines. In order to do this, I am using a damp paper towel, which is not soaked wet. You will need to squeeze the excess water and lightly brush off onto those areas where you want the lines to fade, just like what I'm doing over here. Not too much, just here and there, and that would give you a nice soft look of the entire flower. As for the lotus stem, I'm mixing a little bit of indigo into the olive green yellowish paint, so that I get a very dark deep green shade. I'm just painting that stem using my rigger brush. Extending the same paint mix to create some fine details on the leaves, as in folds and veins, and I'm applying the wet paint onto the dry surface of the painting. And after applying the paint, as usual, I'm just giving it some light washes using a clean damp brush. And before painting the background, I'm just pre-wetting the white areas that I wish to stain with paint. So just pre-wet the paper surface before you drop in any color of your choice. I have decided to use indigo. And once you drop in this wet paint onto the pre-wet surface, of course you'll see them bleeding very quickly onto the pre-wet areas. So just use your damp brush to just have some control on the movement of the pigments. This is a good practice to see how much control you have with your brush strokes on a pre-wet surface, since the pigment that you have dropped are in a very minimal manner. Some paint spatters to complete the look of this painting. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, then do hit the like and share button, and also subscribe to my channel. And I do hope you'll try out these painting techniques, and happy painting. See you in another tutorial. Bye.